Bushes? Bushes. Welcome to the Storycraft Society. Hey everyone, my name's Garmin and welcome to the Storycraft Society, and this is part 3 of our 4-part series on the Goblin Arrows Ambush set from Lost Mines of Phandelver. If you missed the first 2 parts of this series, part 1 we made rocks, part 2 we made fallen logs. A link to those videos will be in the description below, as well as maybe I'll try to figure out how to put my cards above my head or something. But in this week's episode, we're going to be making these cute little baby bushes. So let's get to it and get crafting. Alright, so for this build we're going to need a materials list of scrap XPS insulation foam, some white glue, whether that's Elmer's or Eileen's tacky glue, our Black Magic Craft base coat, various craft paints. We're going to need these little cup lids, which I'll show you in a minute. We're going to need a hobby knife and a little paint mixing tool that I think I got with a cheap palette that I had. We're going to need a hot glue gun, and then we're going to need green flocking of some sort. I'm using Woodland Scenics, but honestly any that you get is fine. So we're going to start with these mini cups, and the important part is the mini cups with lids. We're going to grab a couple of those lids. I really like these for making bases because you can cut out the center section. I use the cups for mixing paint a lot, so I end up having just stacks and stacks and stacks of these little mini lids. So they make fantastic bases. So what I'll do is cut little discs out of the bottom to make my bases, and that's where we're going to start. And then next, we're going to get some scrap XPS insulation foam. This is scrap from the rock episode from the beginning of this series. And then what you're going to do is you're going to carve that down just into a little bush shape. You could make it a little bit more circular if you wanted. You could make it a little bit more oval if you wanted. But either way, you're going to want to kind of carve it down. Don't get too particular with this step, however, because you're going to be covering all of the foam with flocking eventually. But you see, I get it to just kind of a geometric shape there. And then you're going to take your hot glue and just use that to glue the foam down to the little piece of plastic to be your base. When you're done, it should look something like this. For the next step, we're going to take our PVA glue. I'm choosing to use Eileen's tacky glue, but you could easily use Elmer's glue for this if you wanted. I just like the tacky glue because just from the name, it's a little tackier. It just seems to hold a little better for me than the Elmer's glue. But you're going to take that and you're going to apply it all over the top of the base of the plastic piece. And you're going to try to avoid hitting the foam. That's kind of the important part of this step. You can be pretty liberal with your application of the glue onto the bases. You just want to make sure that you don't get any of it onto the foam for right now. So I realized that the material we need for the next step I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video, but what we need is some dirt. And this is actually just dirt that I got from my backyard. And then I sifted it down to being as fine a grade as possible. And what we're going to do is just sprinkle this all over the bases to create our ground texture for around our bushes. When you're done, it should look a little something like this, and then you're going to want to let that dry all the way. Once it's dry, we can go to our painting stage. So we're going to start with our Black Magic Craft base coat, which is just a 50-50 mix of matte Mod Podge and black paint. And we're going to coat the entire piece. Now what I've found just in my experience is when you're doing some kind of like dirt on the base, even after the glue has dried, it still will flake off fairly easily. So what I do is I kind of just stab my brush, that is, into the dirt with a little bit of this base coat on my brush, and that stops me from having to make a brushing motion and knocking any of the excess dirt off. The good news is, however, once you get this base coat on top of that dirt, it's going to be on there fairly solid, and you're not going to have to worry about little pieces starting to flake off. But you want to make sure that you get a nice full coverage on your piece, and then once that dries, we can move on to painting. There's what it should look like once you have everything on it all the way. All right, so now we're going to start painting our dirt. And the way that we're going to do that is by taking a dark brown, and we're going to just paint that onto the ground texture that we already have. And then we're going to do a little bit of blending with a tan, and we're going to just drag that over the surface of the ground texture around our bush to give the dirt a little bit of color variation. And then what you're going to see is I'm actually going to take even another brown. So I started with the tan, and now I'm going to do a honey brown here. And the more colors you use on a base like this, typically the more, obviously color variation, but more realism you're going to get in your dirt texture, because dirt's just not naturally all one color. So once that dries, we're going to go to kind of an ivy green. And we're going to take that, and now we're going to paint over all of our foam area. This is going to be the base for the bush. Now what this is going to do is once it dries, it's going to make it so that the flock that we're eventually going to be putting onto our bush won't, if there's any cracks or anything, it won't show through. So now we're going to take our, at this point we're going to take Elmer's glue, but again, any kind of PVA glue will work. And we're going to take a little bit of our flock. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a whole bunch of the glue mixed in with the flock, and we're going to make basically like a paste out of it. One thing that I've actually found that makes this go a little smoother is I actually am going to take some watered down PVA glue and mix that in also. For some reason, for me at least, it feels like the water kind of makes the glue soak into the flock a little better, and then it seems to dry harder. But you're going to see it, you're going to make it into kind of a paste consistency. It looks really white right now, but don't worry about that. Once it dries, it will absolutely not look white since the glue dries clear. And then what you're going to do is just take your tool here. You could do this with a hobby knife if you wanted, but I just seem to like this tool for spreading a little better. I got it I think in like $1 or $2 paint palette that I got. It came in like a little set. But you just want to take your time and spread it all over the bush, trying to avoid the dirt as much as you can. And then once it's dry, this is what you should end up with. There you have it. Our set is finally starting to come together. We've got our rocks, we've got our fallen logs, we've got our little baby bushes, and now the only thing that's missing is our hill pieces, which is going to be in the conclusion of this series next week. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe, leave a like and a comment down below. Hit the notification bell if you want to know when the Hill episode goes live next week. And until then, I'll be seeing you.